Hello and good evening. Thank you for joining for tonight's dark and scary cryptid horror stories. Let us know in the comments where you are listening from and if there is a cryptid you would like me to make a story on. Now for tonight's stories, I hope you enjoy. The Watchers in the Pines. The logging camp had been established for 3 weeks when the first signs appeared, subtle at first, then increasingly impossible to ignore. The crew of elite forest surveyors, 6 men and women with decades of combined experience in the most remote and challenging terrain, had been mapping the old-growth timber near Ape Canyon when they began to notice that they were not alone. Frank Miller, the crew chief, was the first to document the anomalies. In his daily logs, which would later be analyzed by investigators who found nothing but more questions, he noted sounds that had no source. Footsteps in the undergrowth that stopped when investigated, branches breaking in patterns that suggested deliberate placement, rocks falling from slopes that should have been stable. The crew heard these things, discussed them at night around the fire, and ultimately dismissed them as the normal sounds of a forest that was older than human habitation, a wilderness that had its own rhythms and voices. They were wrong. The last transmission from the survey team came at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in late October. The audio was distorted, filled with static, and what the technicians would later describe as interference patterns that suggested electronic malfunction rather than natural causes. But beneath the noise, beneath the distortion, voices could be heard. Human voices, raised in alarm, calling out to each other, and beneath them something else, something massive moving through the undergrowth, something that made the ground shake. The final sound was the worst. The recording captured it clearly despite the interference, a wet, tearing noise like fabric being ripped, like meat being separated from bone, followed by silence that was absolute and final. The search team arrived 3 days later. They found the camp in disarray, tents shredded, equipment scattered, food stores raided. But no bodies, no blood even, except for a single boot found near the edge of the camp, crushed inward as if stepped on by something weighing over 800 pounds. The boot was Frank Miller's. He had been wearing it when he made the final transmission. The official report called it a probable bear attack. The survey company, Timbercore Industries, paid settlements to the families and quietly shut down the project. The forest was declared off-limits, the trails closed, the area effectively erased from the maps that the company distributed to its clients. But the locals knew better. They had always known better. Ethan Cross first heard about the missing crew from his editor at the Pacific Northwest Gazette, a weekly newspaper that covered environmental issues with the fervor of the true believer and the cynicism of the career journalist. The story had been buried by Timbercore's public relations team, relegated to a brief mention in the accident reports, but Ethan smelled something bigger. A logging company covering up deaths, a mysterious disappearance in the wilderness, the potential for a story that could make his career. "You're not going to get access," his editor warned him. "Timbercore's got the area locked down. The Forest Service is cooperating. The local cops have been told to keep their mouths shut." "Then I'll find another way in," Ethan said. "There's always another way." He started with the families. The crew had been experienced, well paid, mostly from out of state, but they had left families behind who had questions that weren't being answered. Ethan spoke with Frank Miller's widow, a woman named Patricia who lived in a trailer in Eugene and drank her way through the days since the funeral. She showed him Frank's logs, the ones that had been returned by the company after the investigation, and Ethan read them with growing unease. The sounds, the footsteps, the deliberate nature of what Frank had been hearing. This wasn't a bear attack. Bears didn't stalk camps for weeks before attacking. Bears didn't coordinate their movements, didn't use misdirection, didn't plan. "He was scared," Patricia said, her voice slurred with alcohol and grief. "He tried to hide it, but he was scared. He said there was something in the woods that was watching them, something that was learning. Learning what? Ethan asked. Learning them, Patricia said. Learning how they moved, how they thought, how they could be taken. Ethan filed the interview away, along with dozens of others. He spoke with the other families, with the search team members who would talk, with the local police who had been shut out of the investigation. He built a picture of an incident that didn't fit any narrative that Timbercore wanted to promote. But he couldn't get close to the site itself. The area was patrolled by private security, the roads were gated, the trails were blocked. He needed a guide, someone who knew the forest well enough to get him in without being detected. He found Marion Cole through a mutual acquaintance, a retired park ranger who had worked the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest for 30 years before taking early retirement. Marion was 63, with a weathered face that suggested decades of outdoor living and eyes that suggested she had seen things that she didn't talk about. She lived in a cabin outside the town of Cougar, Washington, with 3 dogs and a shotgun, and a reputation for knowing the forest better than anyone alive. "You're looking for the truth about Ape Canyon," Marion said when Ethan arrived at her door. She didn't invite him in. "I can see it on you, the hunger, the need to know." "I need to get to the site," Ethan said. "I need to see what happened." "You don't want to see what happened," Marion said. "No one wants to see what happened. That's why they closed it. That's why they're pretending it was bears." "Then what was it?" Ethan asked. Marion looked at him for a long moment, her eyes scanning his face as if reading something there. "Come inside," she said finally. "I'll tell you a story." Her cabin was exactly what Ethan expected, rustic, cluttered, filled with the accumulated detritus of a life spent in the wilderness. Maps covered the walls, topographical charts marked with notes and symbols that Ethan didn't recognize. Books were stacked on every surface, volumes on local history, on Native American cultures, on cryptozoology and folklore and the unexplained. And photographs, dozens of photographs, showing Marion in various stages of her career, standing in front of trees that were wider than her height, holding fish that seemed too large to be real, posing with colleagues who were now dead or retired or forgotten. 1987, Marion said, pouring coffee from a pot that had been sitting on the stove for hours. "That's when it started, or when I first became aware of it. There was a logging operation bigger than the one that just got shut down. Timbercore was just getting started buying up old-growth leases, clear-cutting everything they could reach. They bulldozed a grove up near Ape Canyon that the local tribes had been trying to protect, said it was just trees, said there was nothing special about it." "And there was?" Ethan asked. "There was everything," Marion said. "The grove was sacred, had been for thousands of years. The tribes called it the meeting place, the place where the world of the living touched the world of the other. They had ceremonies there, offerings, ways of keeping the balance, but Timbercore didn't care about balance. They just cared about bored feet." She sipped her coffee, her eyes distant with memory. "They bulldozed the grove on a Tuesday. By Thursday the crew was gone. 6 men, the best equipment, just vanished. No bodies, no blood, no sign of struggle, just the camp dismantled, tools scattered, and the trees." "The trees," Ethan prompted. "The trees were marked," Marion said. "Every tree within 100 yards of the camp had been touched. Not cut, not damaged, but marked. Symbols carved into the bark. Not human symbols, not anything I'd seen before." "What did they mean?" Ethan asked. "I didn't know then," Marion said. "I know now. They were warnings, territory markers. The Sasquatch were claiming the land back, telling the humans to stay away." "The Sasquatch," Ethan repeated. "The tall ones," Marion said. "The hairy men, the watchers in the pines. They've had many names over the centuries. The tribes knew them, respected them, left them alone, but the loggers didn't know, they didn't respect, they didn't leave." "So what happened to them?" Ethan asked. Marion's eyes met his, and there was something there that made Ethan want to leave, to forget the story, to return to the safety of the city where monsters were metaphorical, and death was something that happened to other people. They were taken, Marion said, to the larder, the place where the Sasquatch store their food. They're not like bears, Mr. Cross. They don't eat everything at once. They're organized, patient. They take what they need and keep the rest. The 1987 crew is still up there, or what's left of them. Ethan should have left then. Should have thanked Marion for her time, walked back to his car, and driven back to the city where stories were just words on paper and the worst thing that could happen was a libel suit. But he was a journalist, and the story was calling to him, and he couldn't turn away from something this big, this real, this terrifying. "I need to see it," he said. "The site, the larder, whatever's up there." "No," Marion said. "You don't. You need to forget about this. Write something else." Timbercore covered it up because they know what happens when people go up there. They don't want more disappearances. They don't want the attention. "But you know how to get there," Ethan said. "You know the way." "I know the way," Marion agreed. "That's why I retired early. That's why I live out here away from everyone. Because I saw what the Sasquatch can do. Because I know what they're capable of. And because I made a promise to stay away." "A promise to who?" Ethan asked. Marion was silent for a long moment. "To them," she said finally. "I made a deal, my life in exchange for my silence. They let me go, Mr. Cross, they let me walk away, but only if I never came back, only if I never brought anyone else." "And you're breaking that promise by talking to me," Ethan said. "I'm not breaking it," Marion said. "I'm just bending it. Telling you the story isn't the same as taking you there, and I'm not taking you there. That would be breaking the deal, that would be." She stopped, her head cocked as if listening to something. "Do you hear that?" she asked. Ethan listened. For a moment there was nothing but the normal sounds of the forest, wind in the trees, birdsong, the distant rush of a creek. But then beneath it all something else. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, moving through the undergrowth outside the cabin. "They're watching," Marion whispered. "They know you're here. They're reminding me of the deal." "Who?" Ethan asked, his voice barely audible. "The Sasquatch." Marion didn't answer. She moved to the window, peering out through a gap in the curtains, and Ethan saw her face go pale, saw her hand move instinctively toward the shotgun that leaned against the wall. "Go," she said, not turning. "Go now, get in your car and drive. Don't look back, don't stop." "Marion!" "G.O.," she shouted, and the force of it propelled Ethan toward the door. He stumbled out into the clearing, and for a moment he saw them. Standing at the edge of the woods, half concealed by the trees, three shapes that were too large to be human, too upright to be bear. They were watching him with eyes that reflected the afternoon light, and they were not afraid. Ethan ran. He ran to his car, fumbled with the keys, started the engine with hands that shook. He looked back only once, saw Marion standing in her doorway with the shotgun in her hands, and saw the shapes moving toward her, not threatening, not attacking, but approaching with the confidence of creatures that had never known fear. He drove away, his heart hammering, his mind racing. He had seen them. Whatever they were, whatever Marion called them, he had seen them, and they had seen him. The story was real. The monsters were real, and he was marked now, somehow, chosen for something he didn't understand. Ethan drove for 3 hours before he felt safe enough to stop. He pulled into a rest area on I-5, turned off the engine and sat in the silence, trying to process what had happened. He had seen them, the Sasquatch, the watchers in the pines, the creatures that had taken 6 loggers in 1987 and another 6 in the present day. They were real. He should go to the police. He should report what he had seen, what Marion had told him, what was happening in the forest outside Cougar. But he knew what would happen. They would laugh at him. They would call him crazy. They would file his report in the circular file and forget about it. No one believed in monsters. That was how the monsters won. He needed proof. He needed to get to the site, find the larder, document everything. He needed to show the world what was really happening in those woods, but he couldn't do it alone. He needed Marion. He needed her knowledge, her experience, her understanding of what they were facing. He drove back to her cabin the next morning, prepared to beg, to bargain, to do whatever it took to convince her to help him. But when he arrived, the cabin was empty. The door was open, swinging in the wind. The dogs were gone. The shotgun was leaning against the wall where Marion had left it. And on the table, in a space that had been cleared of the clutter, was a map. It was hand-drawn, detailed, showing the area around Ape Canyon with markings that Ethan didn't understand. Trails, symbols, warnings written in a language that might have been Native American or might have been something else entirely. And a route, highlighted in red, that led from Marion's cabin to a spot deep in the forest marked with a single word: larder. She had left it for him. Despite the warning, despite the deal, despite the shapes that had come to her door, she had left him a map, a way in, a path to the truth. But there was also a note, written in Marion's precise hand. Don't go. If you go, you won't come back. If you must go, don't scream. They hunt the screamers first. Ethan took the map. He took it and folded it and put it in his pocket, and he drove away from the empty cabin, knowing that he was making a choice that would change everything. He spent 3 days preparing. He bought equipment, cameras, recording devices, GPS trackers, survival gear. He studied the map, memorizing the route, trying to understand the symbols. He researched the area, reading everything he could find about Ape Canyon, about the 1987 incident, about the Native American legends of the Sasquatch. The legends were old, older than the European settlers, older than the tribes that currently inhabited the region. They spoke of tall beings that lived in the forests, that watched humans from the shadows, that took those who violated their territory. They weren't evil, the legend said. They weren't good. They were simply other. Predators who had evolved alongside humans, who had developed intelligence and culture and a society that was as complex as any human civilization. They were survivors, the legend said, the last of a species that had once been widespread, that had been hunted to near extinction by humans who feared them. They had retreated to the deep forests, the remote mountains, the places where humans didn't go, and they had learned to survive by taking what they needed from the edges of human society. Ethan didn't know if he believed the legends. He didn't know if the Sasquatch were intelligent, if they had culture, if they were capable of the complex behavior that Marion had described. But he knew they were real. He had seen them, and he knew they were dangerous. He entered the forest on a Thursday following Marion's map, hiking into the wilderness with a pack that weighed 40 pounds and a heart that felt heavier. The trail was overgrown, barely visible, winding through second-growth timber that had been logged decades ago. But as he climbed higher, as he moved deeper, the forest changed. The trees grew larger, older, the undergrowth thicker, the silence more profound. He camped the first night in a clearing that Marion's map indicated was safe. He didn't sleep well, starting at every sound, his imagination conjuring shapes in the shadows. But nothing came. The night passed in uneasy silence, and he woke at dawn to continue his ascent. The second day was harder. The trail vanished entirely, and he had to navigate by compass and map, bushwhacking through Devil's Club and slough that tore at his clothing and skin. He climbed steadily, moving into the old-growth zone where the trees were hundreds of years old, their trunks wider than cars, their canopies blocking out the sun. And then he saw the first marking. It was carved into the bark of a cedar, high above his head, a symbol that Marion's map identified as a boundary marker. He was entering Sasquatch territory. He was crossing the line that separated the human world from theirs. He should have turned back. The marking was a warning, clear and unambiguous. Beyond this point, you are prey. But Ethan was committed now, too deep to turn back, too close to the story to give up. He pressed on. The forest grew quieter as he moved deeper. The birds stopped singing. The squirrels stopped chattering. Even the wind seemed to die, leaving him in a silence that was absolute and oppressive. He could hear his own heartbeat, his own breathing, the rustle of his clothing as he moved. And then he heard something else. Footsteps, heavy, deliberate, moving parallel to his path. Not ahead, not behind, but to the side, tracking him, following him. He stopped and the footsteps stopped. He moved and the footsteps moved. They were hunting him. He was being hunted. Ethan ran. He abandoned caution, abandoned stealth, ran through the undergrowth with branches whipping at his face and roots tripping his feet. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs gave out, collapsing against a tree that was wider than his outstretched arms, gasping for breath in the silence that had followed him. The footsteps were gone, or rather they had never been pursuing him. They had been herding him, directing him, pushing him towards something that waited ahead. He looked up and he saw it, the larder. It was a cave, or the entrance to one, set into the side of a cliff that rose above the forest floor. The opening was massive, 20 feet high, and the walls around it were covered in markings, the same symbols he had seen on the trees, but more complex, more elaborate, telling a story that he couldn't read but somehow understood. This was their place, their home, the place where they brought their prey. And on the ledge above the entrance, arranged in a pattern that was too deliberate to be natural, were objects that made Ethan's blood run cold. Tools, logging equipment, cameras, GPS units, boots. The belongings of the missing crew displayed like trophies, like offerings, like warnings. He had found them. He had found the proof. Now he just had to survive long enough to tell the story. He was raising his camera to document the scene when he heard the footsteps again. Not one set, but many, surrounding him, closing in. He turned slowly and he saw them. The Sasquatch, the watchers in the pines. They were massive, 8 feet tall or more, covered in dark hair that matted their bodies. Their faces were almost human, almost recognizable, but the proportions were wrong, the features too large, the eyes too intelligent. They moved with a silence that was terrifying, surrounding him with the coordination of a hunting pack. And they were watching him, studying him, deciding what to do with him. Ethan didn't scream. He remembered Marion's warning, "Don't scream, they hunt the screamers first." He stood perfectly still, his camera forgotten in his hand, and waited for them to make their move. The largest of them stepped forward. It was male, Ethan thought, though it was hard to tell, its body covered in hair and muscle that obscured its gender. It reached out with a hand that was larger than a human hand, with fingers that were longer, more flexible, and it touched Ethan's face with a gentleness that was more terrifying than any violence. "You came," it said, and the voice was like rocks grinding together, like wind through pines, like something that had learned to speak by imitating the sounds of the forest. "We waited. We watched. We wondered if you would be wise." You can speak," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible. "We learn," the creature said. "We remember, we have always spoken in our way. You are the first in many years to hear. The others didn't listen. They screamed. They ran. They were taken." "The logging crew," Ethan said. "The surveyors, you took them." "We took them," the creature agreed. "They came to our place. They cut our trees. They disturbed the balance. We took them to restore the balance." "And me?" Ethan asked. "What will you do with me?" The creature's hand remained on his face, its eyes studying him with an intelligence that was ancient and patient. "You are different," it said. "You came to understand. You came to see. You didn't come to take." "I came for the truth," Ethan said. "I came to tell the story." "The story is old," the creature said. "Older than your kind. We were here when the world was young. We will be here when it ends. You cannot tell the story in a way that will make them understand." "Then help me," Ethan said. "Show me, teach me. Let me tell the truth, not the legend." The creature was silent for a long moment, its hand still on Ethan's face. Then it withdrew, stepping back, and the others moved aside, creating a path toward the cave. "Come," it said, "see what we are, see what you would tell, then decide if the story can be told." Ethan looked at the cave, at the darkness that waited within, at the creatures that surrounded him with their ancient patience. He had a choice. He could run, try to escape, probably die in the attempt. Or he could go with them into the dark, into their world, and see what they wanted to show him. He walked toward the cave. The darkness swallowed him, and the watchers in the pines followed. And the forest kept its secrets as it had always done, as it would always do, until the last tree fell and the last story was forgotten. The cave was larger than Ethan had imagined, larger than the entrance suggested, extending deep into the mountain in a network of passages that seemed to have been carved by something other than water or geological process. The walls were smooth, almost polished, and they glowed with a faint luminescence that provided just enough light to navigate by. The Sasquatch moved ahead of him, the large one in the lead, the others following in a formation that suggested hierarchy, organization, society. They didn't look back to see if he was following. They knew he would follow. They had known since he entered their territory. "How do you know English?" Ethan asked, his voice echoing in the space. "How do you speak?" The leader turned its head, and in the faint light, Ethan could see its face more clearly. It was intelligent, he realized. Not animal intelligence, but something closer to human. The eyes held knowledge, memory, understanding. "We listen," it said. "We watch. We learn. Your kind has been in our forest for generations. We have learned your speech as we learned the speech of those who came before." Those who came before. "The first humans," the creature said. "The ones who were here when the world was new. They knew us. They respected us. They left us alone. And now your kind cuts the trees," the creature said, and there was anger in its voice, ancient and patient but still sharp. "Now your kind takes the land. Now your kind forgets what it means to be part of the world instead of its master." They descended deeper, the passage sloping downward at an angle that made Ethan's knees ache. The air grew warmer, which was unexpected, and he realized that the cave system must be geothermally heated, creating a microclimate that was habitable despite the altitude and the season. And then they emerged into a space that took Ethan's breath away. It was a cavern, vast and open, the ceiling lost in darkness far above. But it wasn't empty. The space was filled with life. Plants grew in the faint light, fungi and mosses and things that Ethan didn't recognize, creating a garden that had been cultivated, tended, shaped by intelligence. Water flowed through channels that had been carved, directed, controlled. And in the center of it all, arranged in patterns that suggested meaning, were the remains. Not bodies, not exactly, but the belongings of the taken. The 1987 crew, the recent surveyors, decades of hikers and hunters and explorers who had wandered into Sasquatch territory and never returned. Their equipment was here, their clothing, their tools, arranged with care, displayed with purpose. "This is the larder," the creature said, and the word was wrong, too small, too human for what Ethan was seeing. "This is where we keep what we take, where we remember." "The people," Ethan said, his voice barely audible. "The ones you took, where are they?" The creature gestured toward the far wall, and Ethan saw them. Arranged in niches carved into the stone, preserved by the cold and the dry air, were the bodies. Dried, mummified, kept with a care that suggested reverence rather than consumption. "They're not food," Ethan realized. You don't eat them." "Not food," the creature agreed. "Not prey, they were warnings, messages, lessons for those who would come after." "But Marion said." "The woman who made the deal," the creature interrupted. "She understood enough to be afraid. She didn't understand enough to know the truth." "Then what is the truth?" Ethan asked. The creature moved toward the wall of preserved bodies, its hand reaching out to touch one of the faces. A face that was recognizable even in death, that Ethan could identify from the photographs he had seen in his research. "We don't hunt for food," the creature said. "We hunt for memory, for connection, for understanding. These ones," it gestured to the preserved dead, "came to take. They came to destroy. They came to violate the balance. We took them to restore the balance, to teach the lesson that has been forgotten." "What lesson?" "That the forest is not yours," the creature said, and its voice filled the cavern, resonating off the walls, becoming something that was almost music, almost song. "That the world is not yours. That you are part of something larger, something older, something that will exist long after your cities crumble and your stories are forgotten." Ethan looked at the preserved dead, at the equipment arranged around them, at the care with which they had been kept. "You're not monsters," he said, and the realization was strange, almost disappointing. You're people, a different kind of people, but people." "We are Sasquatch," the creature said. "The Watchers, the Rememberers. We have always been here. We will always be here. And we have waited long enough for your kind to remember." "Remember what?" "Who you are," the creature said. "What you are. What you could be if you stopped taking and started belonging." It moved away from the wall, approaching Ethan with a stride that was deliberate, purposeful. "You came for the story," it said. "You came to tell the world what we are. Will you tell them?" Ethan hesitated. "I don't know what to tell them. I don't know if they'd believe me." "Then show them," the creature said. It reached into the folds of its fur, and Ethan realized that it was wearing something, a garment made of woven plant fiber, decorated with symbols that matched those carved into the cave walls. From within the garment it withdrew an object. It was a camera, modern, digital, the same model that the survey team had been using. The creature held it out to Ethan, offering it. "Take," it said. "Record, show them what waits in the forest, show them what they have forgotten." "Why?" Ethan asked. "Why let me go? Why let me tell the story?" "Because the time of hiding is ending," the creature said. "The world is changing. The forests are falling. The ice is melting. The old ways are dying, and with them the old protections. Soon there will be nowhere left to hide. Soon we will have to stand in the light or be destroyed." "You want me to be your ambassador?" "We want you to be your own," the creature said. "To choose, to remember, to belong." Ethan took the camera. It was warm in his hands, and when he turned it on, the battery indicator showed full charge. The memory card was new, empty, waiting to be filled. "What about the others?" he asked. "The ones you took, what about their families?" "They are remembered," the creature said. "They are part of us now. Their memory lives here in this place in our keeping. When the time comes, when your kind is ready to understand, they will be returned. Their stories will be told." "And if my kind isn't ready?" The creature's eyes met his, and in them, Ethan saw something that he had never seen before, a depth of time, a weight of history, a patience that had been tested for millennia and was beginning to fray. "Then we will do what we must," the creature said. "As we have always done, we will survive." The journey back to the surface was different from the descent. The Sasquatch led Ethan through passages that he hadn't seen, shortcuts that emerged near the edge of their territory. They moved quickly, confidently, with a knowledge of the terrain that had been accumulated over generations. At the boundary, the place where the markings began, the leader stopped. "Remember," it said. "Remember what you have seen. Remember what you have learned. And when you tell your story, tell them this: we are not the monsters. We are the memory. We are the warning. We are what remains when the taking stops and the belonging begins." "I don't know if I can make them understand," Ethan said. "Then try," the creature said. "That is all we ask, try." It turned and vanished into the forest, and the others followed, and Ethan was alone at the edge of Sasquatch territory, holding a camera filled with evidence that would change everything, or nothing, depending on whether the world was ready to believe. He walked back to Marion's cabin in a daze, his mind trying to process what he had seen, what he had learned, what he had been asked to do. The camera hung around his neck, a weight that was more than physical. It contained the truth about the missing crews, about the Sasquatch, about a species that had been hiding in the shadows of human civilization for millennia. But when he reached the cabin, he found it empty. Marion was gone, her dogs were gone, her belongings cleared out as if she had never been there. On the table where the map had been, there was a new note, written in the same precise hand. "They let you go. That means they want something. Be careful what you give them." Ethan searched the cabin, but there was no sign of Marion, no indication of where she had gone or why. She had vanished as completely as the Sasquatch themselves, leaving only warnings and questions. He drove back to the city, to his apartment, to the life that suddenly felt small and false. He uploaded the footage from the camera, watched it on his computer screen, saw the Sasquatch moving through their forest, speaking in their voices, existing in their truth. It was everything he had hoped for: proof, evidence, the story that would make his career. And he couldn't publish it. He tried. He showed the footage to his editor, who watched it with growing disbelief, and then suggested that Ethan take some time off, maybe see a doctor. He showed it to colleagues, to experts, to anyone who would look, and they all saw what they wanted to see: a hoax, a delusion, a desperate attempt to manufacture a story where none existed. The footage was too clear, they said, too perfect. If it were real, why hadn't the Sasquatch been discovered before? Why would they reveal themselves now? It was a setup, a con, a lie. Ethan argued, fought, pleaded. But the more he insisted, the more he sounded like a madman. The camera was examined, the footage analyzed, and the conclusion was inevitable. It was a fake, a fabrication, a sophisticated hoax that had fooled no one but its creator. His career ended quietly. The newspaper let him go with a severance package and a non-disclosure agreement. He tried freelance work, tried writing the story himself, tried publishing it on the internet, where it was swallowed by the noise of conspiracy theories and cryptid sightings and all the other claims that competed for attention. He became a joke, a cautionary tale, the journalist who had lost his mind in the woods and come back with a story that no one believed. But he knew the truth. He carried it with him: the memory of the cave, the larder, the conversation with the creature who had called itself a rememberer rather than a monster. He knew what waited in the forest, what watched from the shadows, what would happen when the world finally ran out of trees. He kept watching. He kept waiting. He kept hoping that the day would come when the story could be told, when the proof would be accepted, when humanity would be ready to remember what it had forgotten. And in his dreams he heard the singing, the Sasquatch calling to him, inviting him back, reminding him that he was marked now, chosen, part of something larger than himself. He never went back. He was too afraid, too broken, too human to answer the call. But he knew, with a certainty that transcended doubt, that the day would come when he would have to choose, when the invitation would become a demand, when the watchers in the pines would stop watching and start acting. And on that day he would have to decide: stand with them or against them, remember or forget, belong or be taken. The forest was waiting. The pines were whispering. And Ethan Cross, who had been given the greatest story of his generation and had failed to tell it, waited too, in his apartment in the city, listening to the silence that was never truly silent. They were out there. They were always out there, and they were getting tired of waiting. The year after his return from the forest, Ethan tried to forget. He found work as a technical writer, creating manuals for software companies, documenting processes that were real and verifiable and utterly devoid of mystery. He moved to a different city, away from the Pacific Northwest, away from the forests and the memories and the dreams. But he couldn't escape. The Sasquatch were in his mind now, implanted by his experience, his conversation, his violation of the boundary between human and other. He saw them in every shadow, heard them in every rustle of wind through trees, felt their attention in every moment of silence. He started seeing a therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, who specialized in trauma and delusion. He told her about the forest, about the cave, about the creatures who had spoken to him. He expected her to diagnose him, to medicate him, to explain away his experience as stress-induced hallucination. Instead, she listened. She asked questions. She took notes. And at the end of their third session, she said something that made Ethan's blood run cold. "I've heard this story before," she said. "Not exactly the same, but similar, from other patients. People who went into the forests, the mountains, the wild places, and came back. Changed." "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. "I mean you're not the first," Dr. Chen said. "There are others, many others. People who have encountered something in the wilderness, something intelligent, something ancient. They don't talk about it publicly because they know what will happen. They'll be called crazy, dismissed, institutionalized, so they keep it secret. They find each other. They form communities." "Communities of what?" Ethan asked. "Communities of witnesses," Dr. Chen said. "People who know the truth and are waiting for the world to be ready to hear it." She gave him a card with an address written on it. "If you want to meet them," she said, "if you want to understand that you're not alone." Ethan went. He found a group of people, 10 or 12, gathered in a community center in a suburb that could have been anywhere. They were ordinary people, teachers, accountants, construction workers, retirees. But they shared a look in their eyes, a knowledge that set them apart from the rest of humanity. They had all seen them. The Sasquatch or things like them, creatures that existed in the margins of the world, in the forests and mountains and deep places where humans didn't go. They had been watched, tracked, sometimes communicated with. They knew the truth. "They're not going to hide forever," a woman named Patricia said. She had encountered the Sasquatch as a child, she said, had been taken briefly and then released with a warning she had never forgotten. "The world is changing. The forests are disappearing. They're running out of places to hide." "And when that happens," Ethan asked. "They'll have to choose," an older man named Robert said. "Reveal themselves or die out, and I don't think they're going to choose extinction." The group met monthly, sharing information, tracking sightings, building a picture of the Sasquatch's range and population. It was larger than Ethan had imagined, spanning the entire Pacific Northwest, extending into Canada, possibly further. Thousands of them living in the remaining wild places, watching, remembering, waiting. "They're planning something," Patricia said at one meeting. "The sightings have been increasing. They're being less careful. They're preparing for something." "What?" Ethan asked. "Contact," Robert said. "Official contact. They're going to reveal themselves soon." "And then what?" Ethan asked. "And then everything changes," Patricia said. "Everything." The revelation, when it came, was not what anyone expected. It wasn't a press conference, a government announcement, a dramatic appearance on national television. It was subtle, quiet, almost missed by the media that was focused on other stories. A hiker found a body in the woods. Not a human body, but not an animal either. Something in between. DNA testing revealed it to be an unknown hominid species, possibly a relic population of Gigantopithecus or an evolutionary offshoot of early humans. The scientific community was skeptical at first, but the evidence was compelling. The body was real, the DNA was real, and slowly, grudgingly, the possibility of a Bigfoot-like creature existing in North America moved from cryptozoology into legitimate scientific inquiry. But it wasn't just one body. As the investigation continued, more remains were found, more evidence, more proof that something had been living in the forests, something intelligent, something that had been hiding for thousands of years. And then came the communication. It started with signs. Symbols carved into trees, messages left at research sites, patterns that suggested language, intelligence, culture. The Sasquatch were reaching out, making contact, trying to communicate with the humans who were suddenly aware of their existence. Ethan followed the story obsessively, writing about it on his blog, which had gained a following in the years since his breakdown. He was contacted by journalists, researchers, government officials who wanted to know what he knew. He told them everything, and this time they listened. The world changed, not overnight but gradually, inexorably. The Sasquatch were granted protected status, their territories preserved, their rights recognized. They were a new species, a new nation, a new way of understanding what it meant to be human. Or not human? That was the question that plagued the philosophers, the theologians, the legal scholars. What were the Sasquatch? People? Animals? Something else entirely? Ethan knew. He had seen them in their home, had spoken with them, had been offered their trust. They were people. Different, ancient, other, but people. With culture, language, society, history. With rights and responsibilities and a claim to the world that was as valid as any human's. But knowing wasn't enough. The world had to accept it. Humanity had to change. And change it did. Slowly, painfully, with resistance and conflict and all the violence that characterized human history. But it changed. The Sasquatch were integrated, not assimilated, but integrated into the human world. They taught their history, their culture, their knowledge of the forest. They learned from humans in turn, adapting to a world that was suddenly aware of their existence. And Ethan became a bridge, a translator, a voice for the Sasquatch in the human world and for humanity in the Sasquatch's councils. He had been chosen, marked, made into something that was neither fully human nor fully other, but something in between. He never forgot Marion. He never forgot the cabin, the map, the warning that had saved his life. He searched for her, hired investigators, followed leads that went nowhere. She had vanished completely, erased from the world as completely as if she had never existed. Until one day, 15 years after his first encounter, he received a package. No return address, no sender, just his name in a handwriting he recognized. Inside was a photograph. Marion standing in a forest that Ethan recognized, the larder, the cave, the place where the Sasquatch kept their memories. She was older, her hair white, her face lined with age, but she was smiling. Beside her stood the creature Ethan had spoken with, the leader, the rememberer. And on the back of the photograph, a single word, belonged. Ethan understood. Marion had gone back. She had broken her deal, returned to the forest, and she had been accepted. Not as prey, not as a warning, but as one of them. She had found what she had been missing, what the Sasquatch offered to those who were ready. He kept the photograph on his desk, a reminder of what was possible, of what the future could hold. The world had changed. Humanity had changed. The watchers in the pines were watching no longer. They were participating, contributing, belonging. And Ethan, who had started as a skeptic, a journalist looking for a story, had become something else entirely. A believer, a bridge, a rememberer in his own right, carrying the truth to a world that was finally ready to hear it. The forest whispered still, but now the whispers were welcome. The pines watched, but now they watched over rather than against. The Sasquatch were no longer the monsters in the shadows. They were neighbors, friends, family. And Ethan at last was home. In the end, the story wasn't about monsters. It was about misunderstanding, about fear, about the walls we build between ourselves and the other, and the courage it takes to tear them down. The Sasquatch had been waiting for thousands of years, waiting for humanity to be ready, waiting for the moment when the taking would stop and the belonging would begin. That moment had arrived. The watchers in the pines were watching no longer. They were standing in the light, and the light at last was accepting them. Ethan wrote the final chapter of his book, the definitive account of contact between human and Sasquatch, the story that had started with a disappearance in the forest and ended with a new understanding of what it meant to share a world. He wrote of Marion, of the larder, of the conversation that had changed everything. He wrote of belonging, of finding one's place in the world not by taking it, but by being accepted into it. And when he was done, he closed his laptop, looked out at the forest that grew right up to his window, and smiled. They were out there, they were always out there, and now at last they were welcome. The trees whispered, The pines watched, and Ethan Cross, who had been given the greatest story of his generation and had finally learned to tell it, sat in the silence and listened, belonging at last to something larger than himself. The photograph of Marion should have been the end of Ethan's story. A happy ending, if not exactly a conventional one. A woman who had been lost was found, not dead but transformed, belonging to something larger than herself. A reconciliation between human and other, a closing of the circle that had been opened when the first tree fell in Ape Canyon. But stories don't always end where we think they do, and the forest, like the Sasquatch themselves, was patient. It had been waiting for millennia. It could wait a little longer. 5 years after the photograph arrived, the world had indeed changed. The Sasquatch were no longer legend. They were fact, documented and studied and protected by international law. They had been granted territorial rights, cultural autonomy, recognition as a sentient species. The forests where they lived were preserved, expanded, made into sanctuaries where human intrusion was limited and regulated. Ethan had played his part in this transformation. His book, The Watchers in the Pines, A New Understanding, had become a bestseller, translated into 40 languages, studied in universities, cited in policy debates. He was invited to speak at conferences, consulted by governments, respected as the foremost authority on Sasquatch culture and human-Sasquatch relations. He should have been satisfied. He should have been proud. He had achieved everything he set out to do, prove the existence of the creatures, tell their story, change the world's understanding of what it meant to be human. But he wasn't satisfied. Something was wrong, something he couldn't name, a feeling that grew stronger with each passing year. The Sasquatch were being studied, yes. They were being protected, but they were also being contained, managed, controlled. The humans hadn't learned. They had just adapted. They had found a way to incorporate the Sasquatch into their systems, their structures, their ways of understanding the world. The creatures were no longer monsters to be feared, but resources to be exploited. Their knowledge of the forest was cataloged and extracted. Their culture was documented and displayed. Their territories were mapped and monitored. They were being domesticated, and Ethan, who had wanted to save them, had helped to cage them. He returned to the forest in the spring of the 5th year, driving the same roads he had traveled decades ago, parking at the same trailhead where he had begun his journey. The area was different now, a visitor center, a parking lot, a staffed entrance where rangers checked permits and gave lectures about Sasquatch etiquette. "Stay on the marked trails," the ranger told him, a young woman who had memorized her script but never seen a Sasquatch. "Don't approach them if you see them. Don't feed them. Don't try to communicate. They're wild animals despite their similarities to us." Wild animals. Ethan nodded, took his permit, and entered the forest that had once been wild, that was now a managed wilderness, a theme park version of the sacred. He walked for hours, past the marked trails, past the viewing platforms, past the boundaries that the humans had established. He walked into the deep forest, where the trees were older than nations, where the silence was real, where the Sasquatch still lived as they had always lived. Or did they? The signs were there if you knew how to read them. Trees marked with symbols that weren't on the official interpretive materials. Trails that diverged from the maps, leading deeper into territory that was supposed to be off-limits. The forest was fighting back, he realized. The Sasquatch were reclaiming what had been taken. He found the larder, or what was left of it. The cave entrance had been sealed, collapsed, hidden beneath rockfall that looked natural but was too convenient to be accidental. The Sasquatch had moved deeper, retreated further, built new larders in places the humans hadn't found yet. But they were watching him. He could feel them, the same prickling awareness he had felt decades ago, the same sense of being observed by intelligences that were older and more patient than his own. "I need to talk to you," he said to the empty forest, his voice echoing among the trees. "I need to understand." For a long time, nothing happened. The wind blew through the pines. A bird called in the distance. The forest was silent in the way that meant it was listening. Then they came. Not the leader he had spoken with before, but a new one, younger, or at least younger looking. Its fur was darker, its eyes less patient, more angry. "You return," it said, and its voice was different from the leader's, sharper, more human in its anger. "The one who told our story, the one who was supposed to help." "I tried to help," Ethan said. "I told the world about you. I made them recognize you, protect you." "Protect," the creature laughed, and the sound was like breaking branches, like warning calls. "You caged us. You studied us. You turned us into specimens, into curiosities. We were free and now we are contained." "That's not," Ethan started. "It is," the creature interrupted. "We know what you did. We know what your kind always does. You take, you name, you control, you call it protection, but it is consumption. You have consumed us." "I didn't know," Ethan said, and he heard the weakness in his voice, the excuse that was no excuse. "I thought I was helping, I thought." "You thought," the creature said. "That is the problem. Your kind thinks. You think you understand. You think you know what is best. You think you can take what you want and give back what you don't need." "What do you want?" Ethan asked. "What can I do?" The creature moved closer, and Ethan saw that it was carrying something. A bundle, wrapped in woven plant fiber, the same material he had seen in the larder. "We want what we have always wanted," the creature said. "To be left alone, to belong to the forest, to remember when men were prey and to make them remember as well." "I can't make them leave," Ethan said. "I can't undo what's been done. The governments, the laws, the protections." "The protections are chains," the creature said, "and chains can be broken." It unwrapped the bundle, and Ethan saw what was inside. Marion's face, preserved like the others in the larder, her eyes open, her mouth frozen in an expression that might have been peace or might have been terror. "She came back," the creature said. "As you knew, she wanted to belong, she wanted to become part of us, but belonging has a price." "What price?" Ethan whispered. "The price of memory," the creature said. "To belong to the forest, to the Sasquatch, is to become part of the remembering, to be kept, preserved, made eternal in the larder. She is with us now. She will always be with us." "You killed her," Ethan said, horror rising in his throat. "We remembered her," the creature corrected. "She gave herself to us, as you can, as you will." "I'm not," Ethan backed away, but there were others behind him now, emerging from the trees surrounding him. The hunting pack, the watchers. "I'm not giving myself to you. I'm not." "You already have," the creature said. "When you told our story, you marked yourself. You became part of the memory. The only question is whether you will join it willingly or whether you will be taken." "Marion warned me," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "She said you would come for me, she said." "Marion understood," the creature said. "In the end. She understood that the only way to survive is to belong, to become part of something larger, to be remembered rather than forgotten." The others moved closer, their massive forms blocking out the light, their smell filling Ethan's lungs. He was going to die here, he realized. Or worse, he was going to be kept, preserved, made into a warning for others who thought they could tell the Sasquatch's story without becoming part of it. "Why?" he asked. "Why do this? Why kill? Why take?" "Because you don't listen," the creature said, and its voice was sad now, ancient, tired. "We warned you. We marked the trees. We left the bodies where you would find them. We tried to teach you to stay away, to respect the boundaries, to leave us alone. But you never listened. You kept coming, kept taking, kept destroying. So we adapted. We learned to use your ways, to tell our story in your language, to become part of your world so that you would become part of ours." It was a trap, Ethan realized. All of it. Letting me go, giving me the camera, letting me tell the story. It was all part of a plan. "The plan was survival," the creature said. "Your kind was going to destroy us. The forests were falling. We had to act. We had to make you see us, acknowledge us, protect us. And it worked. You protected us. You saved us, and in doing so you bound us, caged us, controlled us. But you said, "We said what we needed to say," the creature interrupted. "Now we do what we need to do. The forest is dying. Your kind's protection is suffocation. We need to be free. And to be free, we need to be feared again." "You're going to attack," Ethan said. "You're going to hurt people." "We are going to hunt," the creature corrected. "As we have always hunted. We are going to remind your kind that the forest is not yours, that you are prey as well as predator, that the old ways are not forgotten." "And me?" Ethan asked. "What happens to me?" The creature reached out with its massive hand, touching Ethan's face with the same gentleness he remembered from decades ago. "You become the story," it said. "The journalist who told our tale and was consumed by it. The warning that the next generation will remember." "No," Ethan said, but he knew it was useless. He had walked into their territory, broken their boundaries, reminded them of his existence. He had made himself a target, a message, a sacrifice. "Yes," the creature said, and then it sang. The song was beautiful, terrible, ancient. It was the same song Ethan had heard in his dreams, the invitation, the call to belonging. But now he heard it for what it was, not a welcome but a binding, a spell, a trap that had been laid decades ago and was only now closing. He felt himself changing, his skin itching, his bones shifting, his consciousness expanding to include perceptions that had no name. He was becoming, transforming, being made into something that would serve the Sasquatch's purpose. He would be the bridge, he realized, not between human and Sasquatch, but between the worlds. A creature that was neither, that could walk in both, that would carry the message of fear to the humans and the message of dominion to the forest. He would be the first of a new kind, the template for a hybrid species that would serve the Sasquatch's needs, the beginning of a transformation that would remake the human world, one conversion at a time. "No," he said again, but his voice was different now, deeper, carrying harmonics that suggested multiple speakers. "Yes," the creature said, "you belong to us now, you always have." The transformation was complete. Ethan looked at his hands, at the fur that was growing there, at the claws that were extending from his fingers. He looked at the forest, at the Sasquatch, at the world that was suddenly more vivid, more immediate, more real than it had ever been. He was one of them now, or something like them, a watcher, a rememberer, a hunter. "What do I do?" he asked, and his voice was no longer entirely human. "You hunt," the creature said. "You watch, you remember. You take those who come to the forest, who violate the boundaries, who think they can tell our story without becoming part of it. You add them to the larder. You make them eternal." "And if I refuse?" "Then you die," the creature said. "And another takes your place. The forest is patient. The remembering continues." Ethan stood in the forest, transformed, trapped, and he understood at last what Marion had understood. What all of them understood. The Sasquatch didn't hate humans. They didn't even fear them. They simply used them. As humans used cattle, as humans used forests, as humans used everything they encountered. The difference was that the Sasquatch were honest about it. They didn't pretend their consumption was protection. They didn't call their hunting conservation. They simply took what they needed and made the rest eternal in their remembering. "I accept," Ethan said, and he hated himself for saying it. "I will hunt, I will remember, I will belong." "Good," the creature said. "The forest welcomes you." They led him deeper, to a new larder, a place where the transformation could be completed, where the hybrid could be taught, where the new watcher could learn the songs. He was not alone. There were others, dozens of them, hundreds preserved in the eternal cold, their faces familiar from missing persons reports, from news stories, from the human world's endless supply of those who ventured too far into the wild and never returned. And there were others like him, hybrids, transformed, the ones who had accepted, who had chosen to become rather than die. They moved through the larder with purpose, tending the preserved, singing the songs, maintaining the memory that was the Sasquatch's true purpose. Ethan joined them. He learned the songs, the ways of hunting, the techniques of taking and keeping. He became good at it, efficient, skilled. He used his knowledge of human behavior to predict their movements, to set traps, to take them without waste. He became what he had once hunted. He became the monster. But he never forgot. In the moments between hunting, between songs, between the endless tasks of the larder, he remembered what he had been: a journalist, a seeker of truth, a man who had wanted to tell the world about the wonders hidden in the forest. And he told them, in his way. He left messages, signs, warnings carved into trees that the humans would find. He arranged the bodies of his victims in patterns that suggested meaning, that told the story of what had happened to them. He created the evidence that someone, someday, might use to understand. But no one understood. The disappearances continued, the stories were told, the warnings were ignored. The humans kept coming to the forest, kept taking from it, kept destroying what they couldn't comprehend. And Ethan, who had been their champion, their voice, their bridge, kept taking them, kept adding them to the larder, kept the memory alive. He was a watcher in the pines now. He would be forever. And he watched with the patience of the transformed, the hunger of the hunter, the sorrow of the man who had learned too late that some stories should never be told. In the end, the forest won. It always did. The humans built their cities, their roads, their machines, but the forest waited. It was older than them, wiser, more patient. It would outlast their civilization as it had outlasted 1,000 before. And the Sasquatch, the watchers, the rememberers would be there to see it, to hunt in the ruins, to keep the memory of what had been, to wait for the next species that would come to take, to name, to control. Ethan was part of that now, part of the eternal, the journalist who had become the story, the man who had become the monster, the bridge between human and other that was also a wall. He stood on a ridge one evening, years after his transformation, watching the sunset over the forest that had claimed him. The light was golden, the air was clear, and for a moment he could almost believe that he was human again, that he could walk back to his old life, that he could tell the truth and be believed. But the sun set, the darkness came, and the forest whispered its welcome, its hunger, its endless patience. He answered with a song, the hunting song, the invitation, the call to those who would come, who would take, who would violate the boundaries. They always came, they always took, they never learned. And Ethan, the watcher in the pines, waited for them, patient as the forest, hungry as the Sasquatch, eternal as the memory that would never die. The trees whispered, the pines watched, and the hybrid who had been Ethan Cross stood in the silence, belonging at last to something larger than himself, something older than humanity, something that would remember him long after his original self was forgotten. The forest kept its secrets, the Sasquatch kept their hunger, and the story that had started with a disappearance ended with a transformation, a joining, a becoming that was also a loss. Don't go into the woods, the warning went. Don't tell their story, don't try to understand. But someone always did. Someone always would. And the watchers in the pines would be waiting, patient and hungry and remembering, for the next one who thought they could tell the tale without becoming part of it. The end was not an end. It was a beginning. The beginning of Ethan's true story, the story that would never be written, never be told, never be understood by the humans who thought they knew what lurked in the shadows. He was the shadow now, the whisper, the warning. He was the watcher in the pines. And he was still watching, still waiting, still hungry. The forest never sleeps, the watchers never stop, and the story never ends. Ethan sang his song, and the darkness answered, and the night that never ended swallowed him once more. He had found his place. He had become his story. And the pines kept their watch as they had always watched, as they would always watch, until the last tree fell and the last story was told. The end. Or perhaps only the beginning. The Last Bloodline. The drought had been going on for 18 months when the first bodies appeared, though at the time no one called them bodies. They were just dead goats, 7 of them, scattered across the scrubland behind Jedediah Cortez's ranch like discarded toys. The ranch hands found them at dawn, their carcasses already buzzing with flies despite the morning chill, and the smell hit them first, not the sweet rot of normal death, but something sharper, chemical like sulfur mixed with copper. Jedediah was 63 years old, a third-generation Texas rancher who'd seen his share of hard times and predators. He'd lost cattle to coyotes, to lightning strikes, to the occasional rogue bobcat, but he'd never seen anything like this. "They ain't been ate," his foreman Miguel said, kneeling beside the nearest carcass. "Look at this. No bite marks, no claw marks, just holes." He was right. Each goat had a single puncture wound, precisely placed at the base of the throat, and when Jedediah touched one of the bodies, his finger sank into the cavity of the chest. The animal was hollow, not just drained of blood, scooped clean. The organs were gone, the ribcage empty, the spine visible and bleached white as if the thing inside had been extracted by some impossibly precise instrument. "Pack 'em up," Jedediah said, his voice hoarse. "Burn 'em." "Shouldn't we call someone? Animal control, the sheriff." "And tell them what? That something sucked the guts out of my goats through a straw," Jedediah spat into the dust. "Just burn 'em and double the patrols tonight. Whatever did this is still out there." But the patrols found nothing. The next morning there were 5 more goats, arranged in a circle, their hollowed bodies facing inward as if they'd been gathered for some ritual. The puncture wounds were identical, the precision surgical, and in the center of the circle, someone or something had drawn a symbol in the dirt, 3 claw marks radiating outward from a central point. Jedediah Cortez died of a heart attack 3 days later. The official report said stress, heat, the burden of running a failing ranch in impossible conditions. But his widow told a different story to anyone who would listen. She said he'd stopped sleeping, stopped eating, spent his nights on the porch with a shotgun across his lap, staring out at the darkness. She said he'd heard something on the roof the night before he died, something walking with a gait that wasn't quite right, too heavy for a coyote, too light for a man. She said he'd turned to her in the morning, his face gray with terror, and whispered, "It's not from here. It's not from anywhere on this earth." Then he'd clutched his chest and fallen dead. The Cortez Ranch was abandoned by the end of the month. The symbol in the dirt remained, baked hard by the sun, visible from the county road. People drove past it quickly, windows rolled up, air conditioning blasting, pretending they didn't see it. But they all saw, and they all wondered. Dr. Elena Vasquez first heard about the Cortez deaths 3 months later, in a bar in Austin where she was drowning her sorrows in mezcal and waiting for her career to finish its slow-motion collapse. She had been, until 18 months ago, a respected cryptozoologist affiliated with the Smithsonian Institution, a researcher who'd spent 15 years tracking reports of anomalous animals across the Americas, building a database of sightings that spanned from the Amazon to the Yukon. She'd been on the verge of publishing her magnum opus, a comprehensive analysis of North American cryptid reports, when the scandal hit. It wasn't even her fault, not really. A graduate student had fabricated data in one of their joint papers, and when the fabrication came to light, the student had blamed Elena, claimed she'd pressured him to produce results. The accusations were false, eventually disproven, but by then the damage was done. Her tenure was denied. Her funding was pulled. Her reputation was shredded in the academic press and left to rot on social media. Now she was 41, unemployed, and drinking away her savings while the world forgot she'd ever existed. "You Elena Vasquez." The voice was male, young, with a thick West Texas accent. Elena looked up from her drink to find a kid standing at her table, maybe 25, with sunburned skin and nervous eyes. He was holding a manila envelope that trembled slightly in his hands. "Who wants to know?" "My name's Tommy Hendricks. My uncle told me to find you, said you were the only one who might understand." He set the envelope on the table. "He disappeared 3 weeks ago. His ranch. The same thing that got Cortez's goats, but worse." Elena didn't touch the envelope. "I'm not a private investigator. I'm not even a scientist anymore. Whatever your uncle's problem is, you need to talk to the police. The police say it's coyotes. Say my uncle probably just walked into the desert and died of heat exposure. But they didn't see what I saw." Tommy's voice cracked. "They didn't see what was left of the herd." Against her better judgment, Elena opened the envelope. Inside were photographs, grainy, taken with a phone camera but clear enough to show what they depicted. Dead cattle, dozens of them, arranged in patterns that looked almost deliberate. Circles within circles, lines that suggested constellations. And in the center of it all, a single photograph of something that shouldn't exist. The creature in the photo was caught mid-leap, its body elongated and hairless, skin gray and mottled like a reptile's. It had 3-toed feet, each toe ending in a curved claw, and its arms. God, its arms were wrong, too long, bending in places that suggested joints in all the wrong places. Its head was turned toward the camera, and even in the low resolution, Elena could see its eyes. Red, reflecting the camera, flashed like a demon's. "Where was this taken?" "My uncle's place, outside Marfa, 3 days before he disappeared." Elena stared at the photograph, her scientific mind racing through possibilities. Mange-ridden coyote, deformed by disease. A feral dog with a skin condition. A juvenile bear, somehow mutated by pollution or radiation. But the proportions were wrong. The gait was wrong. The eyes, those impossible red eyes, were wrong. "This could be anything," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "There's more," Tommy said. He pulled out his phone and opened a video file. "This is the radio transmission. The night before he disappeared, my uncle was on the CB talking to other ranchers about the drought. Then he started screaming." The audio was poor quality, full of static and crackle. But through the noise, Elena could make out a man's voice, panic-stricken, disbelieving, describing something moving through his goat pen. "It's not a coyote," he kept saying. "It's not anything natural. It's tearing through them like paper. Jesus God, it's looking at me. It's—" The transmission ended with a sound that Elena would remember for the rest of her life. Not a scream, exactly. More like a wet gurgle, a throat filling with something that shouldn't be there. Then a hiss, long and sibilant, that continued for several seconds after the voice stopped. The hiss didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like language, like something trying to speak with a mouth that wasn't made for words. "Play that again," Elena whispered. Tommy replayed the clip. Elena listened 3 more times, her fingers trembling around her glass. The hiss at the end, she'd heard something like it before, years ago, in a recording from the Amazon. A tribe had captured it during a night hunt, claimed it was the voice of the blood drinker, a creature that came from the stars and fed on the living. She dismissed it as superstition, folklore, the kind of story that emerged wherever people died mysteriously in the dark. But now, listening to that hiss from a West Texas ranch, she wasn't so sure. "I'll need to see the site," she said. "And I'll need access to everything, your uncle's records, the veterinary reports, any physical evidence the police collected." "There's no evidence. The police didn't collect anything. They said it was a waste of time." "Then I'll collect it myself." Elena finished her drink and stood up, swaying slightly. "Give me 12 hours to get my gear together. I'll meet you in Marfa." Tommy nodded, relief washing over his face. Thank you, Dr. Vasquez. I knew you'd believe me." "I don't believe anything yet," Elena said, "but I'm willing to look. That's more than anyone else has offered." They drove to Marfa in Tommy's battered pickup, 12 hours of desert highway and silence. Elena spent the time reviewing what she knew about the region's cryptid folklore. The Marfa lights, of course, the famous atmospheric phenomena that drew tourists and researchers alike. But there were older stories, too, whispered by ranchers and border patrol agents, stories of things that moved through the desert at night, things that left three-toed tracks and smelled of sulfur, things that drank blood and wore the faces of the dead. The Chupacabra was the modern name, popularized by Puerto Rican sightings in the 1990s. But similar creatures had been reported across Latin America for centuries, and in Texas, the stories went back to Spanish colonial times. The missionaries had called them devil dogs or blood-sucking witches. The Comanche had spoken of corpse walkers that came from the caves and feasted on livestock during times of drought. And in recent years, as the climate changed and the borderlands became increasingly militarized, the sightings had increased. Alina had dismissed most of these reports as mass hysteria, misidentified coyotes, or hoaxes perpetrated for attention or insurance fraud. But the photographs Tommy had shown her, combined with the radio transmission, suggested something else, something that didn't fit any known taxonomy. The Hendricks Ranch was 50 miles outside Marfa, accessible only by dirt roads that turned to powder in the drought. When they arrived, Alina understood immediately why the police had been so quick to dismiss Tommy's concerns. The land was desolate, scrub brush and rocks stretching to the horizon, the sky a merciless blue dome that seemed to press down on the earth. A few skeletal cattle wandered the property, their ribs showing through patchy fur, their eyes dull with hunger and thirst. The main house was a double-wide trailer surrounded by outbuildings in various states of collapse. It looked like a place where people went to disappear. "This way," Tommy said, leading her toward a barn that leaned dangerously to one side. "This is where we found the herd." The smell hit Alina before she entered. She'd worked on enough field sites to recognize death, but this was different, not decay, but absence, like something had removed the very possibility of life from the air itself. She pulled a bandana over her nose and mouth and followed Tommy inside. The barn was empty now, the carcasses removed by the police or coyotes or whatever scavengers could tolerate the stench. But the ground was still stained, dark patches where blood had pooled and dried in the 100-degree heat. And there were tracks, preserved in the hard-packed dirt, that Alina recognized immediately. 3 toes, forward-facing, and a dewclaw position like a thumb. She knelt, pulling out her camera and photographed everything. The tracks, the bloodstains, the strange pattern of disturbances in the dust that suggested something had moved in circles, around and around, as if performing a dance. "My uncle was found the next morning," Tommy said, his voice hollow. "In the goat pen, he'd opened the gate, let them all out, then he lay down in the center end." He couldn't finish. Alina didn't need him to. She'd seen the police photos in the file, the body lying in a perfect circle of dead animals, the throat opened with surgical precision, the chest hollowed out like the livestock. Roy Hendricks hadn't been killed by heat exposure. He'd been harvested. "Show me where you took the photo," she said, "the one of the creature." Tommy led her outside, around the back of the barn to a ridge overlooking a dry creek bed. "I was up here trying to get cell reception. I heard something moving below, looked down, and it was there for just a second. Then it jumped into the creek bed, but it didn't climb down, it just vaulted like a kangaroo, but wrong. The legs went backward." He demonstrated, hopping awkwardly, and Alina felt a chill despite the heat. "It covered 20 feet in one leap. Nothing can do that." "Show me where it landed." They climbed down to the creek bed, the rock so hot it burned through Alina's boots. At the bottom she found more tracks, deeper here where the sand was softer. The 3-toed impressions were clear, and between them something else. Drag marks, as if the creature had been carrying something heavy. "Your uncle was found in the goat pen," she said slowly. "But these tracks lead away from the barn, toward the ridge." "I don't understand." I'm saying whatever killed your uncle didn't come from the desert. It came from somewhere else, and after it killed him, it went back. She followed the tracks to the base of the ridge, where they disappeared into a crack in the rock face. The opening was narrow, maybe 2 feet wide, but the stone around it was worn smooth, polished by generations of passage. And the smell, that sulfur copper stench, emanated from the darkness within. "We need to go in there," Alina said. "Are you crazy? That thing is still in there." "I don't think so. I think it goes deep. These caves, the geology here is limestone karst formations, caves that go on for miles. Whatever this is, it's been using them for a long time." "Then we call the authorities. We get backup." "We call the authorities and they send animal control with catch poles and tranquilizer guns. Whatever this is, it's not an animal. Not exactly. And if we're going to understand it, we need to see where it lives." She was already unpacking her gear: flashlight, rope, sample containers, camera. Tommy watched her with a mixture of awe and terror. "You're really going in there?" "I'm going to take a look. If I find anything, we'll call for help, but I need to know what we're dealing with first." The crack in the rock led to a passage that dropped steeply into darkness. Alina clipped herself to the rope and descended carefully, her flashlight cutting a narrow beam through the absolute black. The temperature dropped as she went deeper, a welcome relief from the desert heat above, but the smell grew stronger, that chemical tang that seemed to coat her tongue and burn her nostrils. After 50 feet, the passage opened into a chamber. Alina swept her light across the walls and gasped. The cave was natural, formed by water over millions of years, but it had been modified. The walls were carved with symbols, not writing exactly, but diagrams, maps of some kind. Constellations maybe, or something more abstract. And in the center of the chamber, arranged in neat rows, were eggs. They were huge, each one the size of a football, leathery and mottled, pulsing with a faint bioluminescence that suggested life within. There were dozens of them, perhaps hundreds, filling the chamber like a demonic nursery. And surrounding them, dried and flaking but unmistakable, was a crust of blood. Alina approached slowly, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The eggs were warm to the touch, vibrating slightly, and through the translucent shells she could see shapes moving. Embryos developing rapidly, their forms already suggesting the creature from Tommy's photograph. The 3-toed feet, the elongated limbs, the red eyes just beginning to form. She photographed everything, her hands shaking, her mind racing through implications. This was a breeding ground, a nest. Whatever this creature was, it reproduced here in the dark, feeding its young on blood harvested from the surface. She was reaching for a sample container when she heard it. The hiss. It came from deeper in the cave, from passages beyond her light's reach, and it was louder than the recording, more immediate, more alive. It wasn't just one voice, she realized. It was many, a chorus of sibilant whispers echoing through the stone. Alina didn't hesitate, she ran. She scrambled back up the passage, the rope burning her palms, the hisses following her like a physical force. Tommy was waiting at the entrance, his face white in the desert sun, and he grabbed her arms and pulled her out as something dark moved in the shadows below. "What did you see?" he gasped as they stumbled away from the ridge. "Eggs," Alina panted. "Dozens of eggs. This thing is breeding, Tommy, and there are more of them, many more." They made it back to the truck and drove, fast, back toward Marfa, neither of them speaking until the ranch was a distant memory. Then Alina pulled out her phone and did something she hadn't done in months. She called the Smithsonian. "Dr. Hardesty, please. Tell him it's Alina Vasquez. Tell him I found something he needs to see." Dr. Paul Hardesty was 73 years old, white-haired and liver-spotted, with the impatient manner of a man who'd spent his life waiting for younger people to catch up to his conclusions. He'd been Alina's doctoral advisor, her mentor, the closest thing she'd had to a father since her own had died when she was 12. When she'd been disgraced, he'd been one of the few who'd defended her, and one of the few she'd refused to speak to. Shame was a strange poison. It made you push away the people who wanted to help. He answered her call from his office in Washington, his voice crackling with age and static. "Alina, I didn't expect to hear from you again. I found something, Paul, something real. I need you to see the evidence. The last time you said that, it turned out to be a mangy coyote. This isn't a coyote. This isn't anything on Earth." There was a long pause. Then, "Send me what you have, but Alina, be careful. You don't have any credibility left to lose." She emailed him the photographs, the audio recordings, her notes from the cave. She didn't tell him about the eggs. She wanted to see his face when she revealed that. The next morning, he called her back. "I'm flying to Austin," he said. "Don't do anything else until I get there." They met in a hotel conference room, just the two of them, Hardesty with his briefcase full of reference materials, Alina with her laptop and her desperation. He'd aged in the month since she'd seen him last, she noticed. The skin hung looser on his bones. His hands shook slightly as he opened his files. "I've seen something like this before," he said, spreading photographs across the table. "India, 2019. A researcher named Dejo Thomas contacted me about sightings in Kerala. He called the creature Raktha Athika, the blood drinker. Same three-toed tracks, same method of killing, same biological impossibility." He showed her the photos from India. Dead cattle, hollowed and arranged in patterns. Cave paintings thousands of years old depicting creatures that matched Tommy's photograph. And most disturbingly, a photograph from a traffic camera in Mumbai showing something leaping between buildings, its eyes glowing red in the flash. Thomas believed they were related to bats, Hardesty continued. Flying foxes, specifically. He thought they were a previously unknown species of large chiropteran, but his last email to me suggested he'd changed his mind. He handed her a printed email, dated 3 months ago. "Dear Dr. Hardesty, I must retract my previous hypothesis. The Raktha Athika are not bats. They are not mammals at all in any traditional sense. I have examined tissue samples under electron microscopy. The cellular structure is wrong. The DNA, when I can extract it, matches no known phylum. These creatures are something else entirely. More disturbing, they are changing, evolving. The specimens I studied 5 years ago were primitive, almost animalistic. The current generation shows increased intelligence, tool use, social organization. They are learning from us, Dr. Hardesty, learning fast. I have enclosed coordinates for a nest I discovered in the Western Ghats. I urge you to send a team immediately. I am no longer certain that I am safe here. Respectfully, Dr. Dejo Thomas. P.S. They have wings now. They didn't have wings before." Alina read the email twice, her mouth going dry. He never sent this. He sent it, but he wasn't in Kerala when he wrote it. The IP address traces to a server in Mumbai. He was already running. And now? Hardesty met her eyes. No one has heard from him in 3 months. His university reports him as missing. The Indian authorities assume he was killed by insurgents or bandits or any of the other dangers that befall researchers in remote areas. But I think we both know better. You think these creatures got him? I think they're expanding. India, Texas, these aren't random locations. They're drought zones, areas where water is scarce and blood is concentrated. They're following the climate crisis, Alina, following it like a migration route. Alina thought of the eggs in the cave, the dozens of embryos developing in the dark. They breed fast, and they're getting smarter. Which means we have 2 choices. We can try to study them, understand them, find a way to communicate or coexist, or we can exterminate them before they exterminate us. There's a third option, Alina said quietly. We can warn people, evacuate the region, Give these things the space they need and keep humans away. And how long do you think that would last? A year? 5. They've already learned to hunt livestock. How long until they decide humans are easier prey? They're not making that choice yet. The victims, the human victims, they're isolated, careful. The creatures are avoiding population centers. For now, but Thomas said they're evolving. What happens when they evolve past caution? They sat in silence, the weight of the question pressing between them. Finally, Hardesty gathered his papers. I can get you funding. Not from the Smithsonian, they'll never touch this after your scandal, but from private sources. Wealthy individuals interested in cryptid research. They'll want results, though. Proof. Something they can show their investors. I can get proof. I know where the nest is. I can lead a team there. And if the creatures are still there, if they're hostile, then we'll be prepared. Hardesty studied her for a long moment, his eyes watery but sharp. You've changed, Alina. The girl I knew would never have suggested something this dangerous. The girl you knew hadn't seen her career destroyed by lies. She hadn't spent months drinking herself to death in dive bars. She hadn't heard a man's last moments on a radio recording. Alina stood, gathering her own materials. I'm not that girl anymore, Paul. I'm someone who's been stripped of everything that mattered, and in that stripping I found something I didn't expect. I don't care about reputation. I don't care about tenure. I care about the truth, and I care about stopping these things before they kill more people. If that means risking my life, so be it. Hardesty nodded slowly. The funding will be available in 72 hours. I'll assemble a team, veterinarians, biologists, security. You'll have whatever you need. I need one thing more, Alina said. I need to exhume Roy Hendricks. The request was denied, of course. The family wanted closure. The authorities wanted the case closed. The desert soil had already claimed what was left of the body. But Alina had spent her career navigating bureaucracy, and she knew how to find the cracks in a system. A sympathetic mortician, a misplaced paperwork trail, a midnight exhumation conducted without official sanction. What they found in the grave made the risk worthwhile. Roy Hendricks's body had been buried in a closed casket, officially due to the traumatic nature of the remains. But when Alina opened the coffin, with only Hardesty and a hired assistant as witnesses, she understood why the authorities had been so eager to hide the truth. The body was barely recognizable as human. The skin had been stretched and torn, the bones reformed into angles that suggested the creature had tried to remake him in its own image. The ribcage was splayed outward, the spine elongated, the skull compressed and reshaped. And most horrifying of all, the internal organs, what remained of them, were fused together in a mass that pulsed with a faint, residual warmth. It was converting him, Alina whispered, her voice breaking. It wasn't just killing him, it was trying to make him into one of them. The eggs, Hardesty said, his face pale. You said there were eggs in the cave. What if they're not eggs? What if they're cocoons? They examined the remains under portable lights, photographing everything, taking samples of tissue and bone. The DNA analysis, conducted hastily in a rented lab in Marfa, confirmed their worst fears. The tissue contained genetic material from 3 sources: Roy Hendricks, some unknown animal, and something else entirely. Something that didn't match any terrestrial life form. It's not breeding, Alina realized, staring at the results. It's converting. It takes living hosts and transforms them. The eggs are probably incubators, nursery beds for new creatures grown from human stock. Then the victims aren't just food, Hardesty said. They're raw material. The implications were staggering. If the creatures could convert humans, could breed from human hosts, then every disappearance wasn't just a death. It was a potential new predator added to the population. An exponential growth curve that could overwhelm any containment effort. We need to destroy that nest, Alina said. Every egg, every embryo, everything. And if there are more nests, If this isn't the only one, then we find them too, and we burn them, all of them. They planned the operation over the next week, assembling their team in secret, stockpiling equipment and explosives. Hardesty had found his funding, a billionaire tech investor named Marcus Webb who'd made his fortune in biotech and lost his daughter to a rare blood disorder. Webb was obsessed with the idea of undiscovered species, of medical breakthroughs hidden in the world's unexplored corners. He didn't know about the conversion, about the human hosts. Elena didn't tell him. She needed his money, his resources, his private security team. The strike was scheduled for the new moon, when the creatures would be most active, most likely to be away from the nest hunting. The plan was simple. Enter the cave, plant explosives at strategic points, destroy the eggs, collapse the passages, and get out before the adults returned. It was a good plan. It should have worked. But on the night before the operation, as Elena sat in her motel room reviewing the maps one final time, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. Unknown number. Video attachment. She opened it. The video was dark, clearly shot at night, the camera shaking as if the person holding it was running. She could hear breathing, panicked and ragged, and behind it, the same hiss from the radio recording, closer now, almost intimate. Then the camera turned, and Elena saw the face of the person recording. It was a girl, maybe 17, with brown hair and a nose ring and the wide, terrified eyes of someone who knew she was about to die. She was running through desert scrub, her phone clutched in shaking hands, and behind her, visible in the phone's light, something was following. Not running, vaulting, leaping in that impossible kangaroo gait, covering 20 feet with every bound, its red eyes glowing in the dark. "Someone please help," the girl gasped. "I'm outside Marfa. I was just taking pictures of the stars and, oh God, it's getting closer." The thing leaped again, and this time it landed just behind her. The girl screamed and fell, the camera tumbling into the dirt. For a moment, the view was just sky, stars, the arc of the Milky Way. Then a shadow fell across the lens, and Elena saw the creature's face up close for the first time. It was worse than the photographs. The skin was hairless, gray, covered in what looked like scales or barnacles. The mouth opened to reveal rows of needle teeth, each one hollow, designed for piercing and sucking. The eyes, those terrible red eyes, seemed to look directly into the camera, directly at Elena, as if the creature knew it was being recorded and didn't care. "Please," the girl whimpered. "Please, I just want to go home." The creature hissed. The sound was almost gentle, almost sympathetic. Then it lowered its head and the screen went dark. The audio continued. The wet sounds, the crunching, the girl's screams, which went on far longer than they should have, as if the creature was taking its time, savoring the meal. Then silence. Then a voice, not the girl's, something else, something that spoke with her vocal cords but wasn't her. "Dr. Vasquez, we know you're watching. We know you're planning to hurt our children. We want you to know that we understand. You're afraid. You should be, but we want to offer you something, a partnership, a way to coexist." The voice was wrong, synthesized somehow, like a text-to-speech program trying to sound human, but the words were clear enough. "Come to the cave tomorrow night. Come alone. No explosives, no weapons, no cameras, just you. And we will show you what we really are. We will show you why you should not fear us but welcome us." The video ended. Elena sat frozen, her phone still in her hand. They knew her name. They knew her plans. They had access to technology, to communication networks, to the very devices she was using to track them. They were learning faster than she'd imagined, much faster. She called Hardesty immediately, her voice shaking as she described the video. He was silent for a long time. "It's a trap," he said finally. "Of course it's a trap, but it's also communication. They're reaching out. They're trying to negotiate." "Elena, these things have killed dozens of people. They've turned humans into into whatever Roy Hendricks became. They don't want to negotiate. They want to lure you into a place where they can convert you to. Maybe, or maybe there's something we don't understand, something we've been wrong about from the start. She thought of the email from Dr. Thomas, his warning about evolution. What if they're not just predators? What if they're refugees? Something that fled here from somewhere else and is just trying to survive. You're anthropomorphizing them, projecting human motivations onto something that isn't human. Am I, or am I being scientific, keeping an open mind until I have all the facts? Hardesty sighed, the sound carrying decades of weariness. What do you want to do? I want to go to that cave, alone, unarmed, and I want to see what happens. Elena, if I don't come back, you have my notes. You have the video. You know what to do. Burn the nest. Destroy everything. But if I do come back, if there's a chance for understanding, wouldn't that be worth the risk? She could hear him breathing, could imagine him in his Washington office, surrounded by books and bones and the accumulated knowledge of a lifetime. Finally, he spoke. You're the most stubborn student I ever had, and the bravest. Go, but take a radio, keep it on. If things go wrong, we'll come for you. No, if things go wrong, you run. You get as far away as you can and you call in the military. This isn't something private security can handle anymore. Elena. Promise me, Paul, promise me you'll run. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I promise. She hung up and sat in the dark, waiting for morning. The drive to the cave felt like a journey to the underworld. The desert had never seemed more alien, more hostile, the scrub brush like grasping fingers and the rock formations like broken teeth. When she reached the ridge above the entrance, she killed the engine and sat for a moment, gathering her courage. The radio was in her pocket, turned on but silent. She'd promised to keep communication open, but she hadn't promised to speak. Whatever happened down there, she wanted a record, even if it was just her dying screams. She climbed down to the entrance, the same crack in the rock she'd descended 2 weeks ago. This time, there were no tracks in the dirt, no signs of recent passage. The cave mouth yawned like a waiting throat. Hello, she called, her voice echoing into the dark. I'm here, I'm alone, just like you asked. Silence, then from deep within. Come down, Dr. Vasquez, we have been waiting for you. The voice was clearer than the video, more human. It still had that synthesized quality, that sense of something trying to wear humanity like an ill-fitting suit. But it was also almost beautiful, musical, like wind through crystal. She descended, the rope slippery in her sweating hands. The passage seemed longer this time, or maybe it was just her fear stretching time into impossible lengths. When she reached the chamber, she saw that it had changed. The eggs were still there, still pulsing, but they were no longer the focus. The symbols on the walls were illuminated now, glowing with their own faint light, and in the center of the chamber, someone was waiting. It was the girl from the video, or what was left of her. She was sitting cross-legged on a cushion of dried blood and bone, her body wrapped in what looked like silk spun from her own hair. Her eyes were open, but they weren't human anymore. The pupils were elongated, the irises turned red. And her mouth. Her mouth had been sewn shut, not with thread but with something organic, something that looked like tendon or dried sinew. The stitches were neat, precise, surgical. We had to silence her, the voice said, coming from everywhere and nowhere. She screamed too much. We are trying to learn your language, Dr. Vasquez, but screaming does not teach us anything useful. Elena stared at the girl, at the horror of what had been done to her. What are you? We are travelers. We came from far away, from a place where your kind would say the physics are different. We did not choose to come here. We were exiled, banished. And when we arrived, we were weak, starving. We had to learn to eat what was available. You eat blood. We eat information. Blood is just the medium. The fluid carries the electrical patterns of memory, of consciousness. When we drink, we learn. We grow. We become more like you so that you might become more like us. You convert people, you turn them into whatever that girl is becoming. We offer transformation, evolution. Your kind is dying, Dr. Vasquez, dying of climate and disease and war and stupidity. We offer something else, a joining, a way to survive the death of the world you've made. By turning us into monsters. By turning you into us. We are not monsters, we are simply different, and we are getting better at being human. Look at her. The girl moved, her limbs twitching with coordination that suggested the conversion was further along than Alina had feared. She stood, her movements fluid and graceful, and walked toward Alina with a smile on her sewn-shut mouth. She will be beautiful when she is finished, strong, immortal, free from the weaknesses of flesh. All she had to give up was her fear. And her humanity. Humanity is not a fixed quality, it is a choice. She chose to evolve. She didn't choose anything, you took her. We took her because she was alone, because she was watching the sky and wondering if there was something more. We take the lonely, Dr. Vasquez, the curious, the ones who ask questions like you. The voice was closer now, and Alina realized with a start that it wasn't coming from the walls or the air. It was coming from the passage behind her. She turned slowly and saw what had been speaking. It was massive, filling the entrance, its body a nightmare of limbs and eyes and mouths. It wasn't one creature but many, fused together in a writhing mass of converted flesh, the faces of its victims still visible in the churning biology, their mouths opening and closing in silent screams. The thing's main face, if it could be called a face, was in the center, a vast red eye surrounded by smaller eyes that blinked and wept and watched. "We are sorry for the ones we must take by force," the mass said, its voice coming from multiple throats at once. "But we are running out of time. The drought is ending, the rains are coming, and when they come we must be ready to spread. Your cities, Dr. Vasquez, your billions of lonely, curious, questioning humans, we could save them all, convert them all, give them immortality and purpose and peace. You're talking about genocide. We are talking about transcendence." Alina's hand found the radio in her pocket. Her thumb found the transmit button. She didn't speak, didn't want to alert the thing to what she was doing. She just held the button down, letting the open channel carry the sound of her breathing, of the creature's voice, of the wet, organic noises of the nest. "You have a choice," the mass said. "Join us willingly. Become our voice, our ambassador to your kind. Help us spread peacefully and millions will live who would otherwise die. Or refuse and we will take what we need by force. Your cities will burn with conversion. Your species will become us, one screaming mouth at a time. And if I choose to fight?" "You cannot fight us. We are not of your world. Your weapons, your poisons, your diseases, they touch us but they do not stop us. We have survived the death of stars. We will survive you." Alina thought of Hardesty, listening on the other end of the radio. She thought of the explosives waiting above, the team ready to strike. She thought of the girl with the sewn-shut mouth, who had wanted nothing more than to take pictures of the stars. "Then I choose to be a witness," she said. "I choose to remember." She pulled the radio from her pocket and spoke clearly into it. "Paul, burn it all." Then she ran. The passage seemed longer going up than coming down, the rope slippery in Alina's sweating hands. Behind her, the mass roared, a sound composed of every voice it had ever taken, and the walls themselves seemed to shudder. She could feel it following, not climbing but flowing, a liquid tide of flesh filling the shaft beneath her. She reached the surface gasping, her lungs burning, and threw herself away from the cave entrance. The desert night was cool, the stars brilliant overhead, and for a moment she just lay there, sucking in air that tasted of freedom. Then the ground shook. Not from the thing below, from above. The sky itself seemed to tear open, and Alina saw the contrails of aircraft, military jets flying in formation, their payloads ready. She'd given Hardesty the coordinates. He must have called it in. The military was here. Elena. Hardesty was running toward her from behind a rock formation, his white hair wild in the starlight. Behind him, Tommy was crouched with a rifle, his face pale. "Run," she screamed. "Get away from the cave." They ran, stumbling across the desert scrub, putting distance between themselves and the ridge. Behind them, the cave entrance erupted. Not in flame, at least not at first. The mass emerged, pouring out of the crack in the rock like smoke, like water, like a living flood. It was bigger now, having absorbed the eggs, the girl, everything in the nest, and it rose against the night sky like a new mountain, a living thing of such impossible size that Elena could barely comprehend it. Then the missiles fell. The explosion was silent at first, just light, brilliant white light that turned night into day. Elena felt the heat on her back, felt the shockwave lift her off her feet and throw her forward. She landed hard, her ears ringing, her vision filled with afterimages. When she could see again, the ridge was gone. The cave was a crater, smoking and sulphurous, the rock turned to glass by the heat, and in the center of the destruction, something was still moving. The mass had been torn apart, sheared into pieces by the blast, but the pieces were moving, crawling toward each other, trying to rejoin. She could see faces in the fragments, mouths opening and closing, voices screaming in a dozen languages. "It's not dead," she whispered. "It can't die." More explosions followed, the jets making pass after pass, dropping their payloads until the crater was a lake of fire. Elena watched from where she'd fallen, too stunned to move, as the pieces of the creature writhed and burned and finally stopped. The silence that followed was profound. No insects, no birds, nothing living moved in the desert around them, just the crackle of flames and the whisper of wind. "Is it over?" Tommy asked, his voice barely audible. "It's never over," Elena said. She stood, her body aching, and walked toward the crater. Hardesty tried to stop her, but she shook him off. She had to see. The crater was still hot, the ground baked to ceramic, but in the center something had survived. A single egg, somehow protected by the angle of the blast, lay half buried in the ash. It was cracked, leaking a clear fluid, but inside, Elena could see movement. A hatchling, a baby creature formed in the fire, its skin still smoking, its eyes already open and watching. She knelt, ignoring the heat, and stared into those eyes. They were red like the adults, but there was something different about them, something almost curious. "Dr. Vasquez," Hardesty called from the edge, "get away from there." She didn't move. The hatchling was looking at her, really looking, and she could feel something pressing against her mind, a presence trying to communicate. Not words exactly, images, feelings, fear, loss, the desperate loneliness of exile. "You're just a child," she whispered. "You're not responsible for what the others did." The hatchling made a sound, a chirp that was almost bird-like. Its wings, still wet with birth fluid, twitched and unfolded. They were beautiful, she realized, iridescent like a butterfly's, shimmering with colors that had no names. Then it hissed. The sound was different from the adults, softer, almost pleading. "We could study it," she said, not looking away. "Learn from it, find a way to communicate." "Elena, step away now." She turned to look at Hardesty. His face was hard, his hand raised, and she realized he was holding a gun. "Paul, I'm sorry, but I made a promise. If things went wrong, we were to burn it all. No survivors, no chance for it to spread. It's just a baby. It doesn't understand." "It will, in time it will. And then it will start again. The conversion, the breeding, the spread, we can't allow that." "Then let me take it. I'll go somewhere remote, I'll study it. I'll find a way to." "There's no way, Elena, you know that. These things can't be reasoned with. They can't be tamed. They're a plague, and the only way to stop a plague is to sterilize the wound." He raised the gun. Elena stepped between him and the hatchling. No. Elena, move. No, I won't let you kill a child, no matter what it might become. It's not a child, it's a weapon. It's alive. And I swore an oath to study life, to understand it, not to exterminate it because I'm afraid. They stood there frozen in a tableau of conflict, the fire reflecting in their eyes. Behind Elena, the hatchling chirped again, a sound that was almost like laughter. Then the world exploded. Not from Hardesty's gun, from above. Another missile or a bomb, something that Elena didn't see coming. The blast threw her forward into the crater, her body tumbling down the slope of ash and glass. She felt her ribs crack, felt blood fill her mouth, felt the heat sear her skin. When the ringing in her ears faded, she could hear Hardesty screaming. Not in pain, in horror. No, no, we were supposed to have time. Elena crawled to the lip of the crater, her vision blurred, her body barely responding. She saw Hardesty standing where she'd left him, the gun at his feet, his hands raised in surrender. And surrounding him, emerging from the desert like ghosts, were figures in hazmat suits and body armor, weapons raised, lights blazing. The military, not the Air Force, something else, something that had been waiting for this moment. Dr. Hardesty, a voice called from a loudspeaker, step away from the target. You don't understand, Hardesty pleaded. This is a scientific discovery. This could change everything we know about life in the universe. You can't just destroy it. Step away. Listen to me, I'm a respected scientist. I've worked for the Smithsonian, I've published. The shot was loud, echoing across the desert. Hardesty jerked, his hands going to his chest, and he fell, just like that. One moment a living man, the next moment meat. Elena screamed, or tried to. Her throat was full of blood, her voice barely a whisper. The soldiers moved forward, surrounding the crater, their weapons trained on Elena and the hatchling behind her. She could see their faces through their visors, young men and women who had no idea what they were looking at, who had been told this was a bioweapon, a terrorist threat, something that needed to be neutralized. Dr. Vasquez, the loudspeaker voice said, we know who you are, we know what you found, and we need you to step away from the target. It's not a target, she rasped. It's a child. It is an invasive species, a threat to national security, and it needs to be destroyed before it can spread. You don't understand, there are more of them, thousands, maybe millions. The cave was just one nest. If you kill this one, the others will come. They'll be angry, they'll. Dr. Vasquez, this is your last warning, step away. Elena looked down at the hatchling. It was staring at her, its red eyes wide and trusting. It had imprinted on her, she realized. In its first moments of life, it had seen her face, and now it thought she was its mother. I'm sorry, she whispered. I tried. She stood, her body screaming in protest, and stepped aside. The soldiers opened fire. The hatchling died in a burst of green blood and iridescent scales, its body torn apart by armor-piercing rounds. It made one sound before the end, a chirp that might have been a question, and then it was still. Elena fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, not for the creature but for what it represented. The end of curiosity, the triumph of fear, the decision to destroy rather than understand. Take her, the voice commanded. Hands grabbed her arms, pulling her to her feet. She didn't resist. She had no strength left for resistance. They led her away from the crater, past Hardesty's body, past Tommy who stood frozen in shock, and put her in the back of a truck. A black bag went over her head. Handcuffs bit into her wrists. She didn't know where they were going. She didn't know what would happen to her. She only knew that she had failed. The truck drove for hours, the desert giving way to something else, something that smelled of city and exhaust. When the bag was finally removed, she was in a windowless room, a single bulb overhead, a metal table between her and a man she'd never seen before. Dr. Vasquez, I'm Agent Crowley, Department of Homeland Security. I want a lawyer. You don't get a lawyer. You don't get anything. You are a threat to national security, Dr. Vasquez. You uncovered something that was meant to stay buried, and now we have to deal with the consequences. What consequences? We destroyed the nest. The creatures are dead. Crowley smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. The nest in Texas, yes, but Dr. Vasquez, did you really think that was the only one? He slid a tablet across the table. On the screen, satellite images showed dark spots across the globe. South America, Africa, the Middle East, India, Australia, hundreds of locations, maybe thousands. They're everywhere, Crowley said. They've been here for decades, maybe centuries, living in the caves, the mines, the places humans don't go. And now, thanks to your little adventure, they know we know about them. They're waking up. They're spreading. Then we need to study them, understand them, find a way to what? Coexist. These things convert humans, Dr. Vasquez. They turn us into them. That's not coexistence. That's extinction. Then what do you plan to do? Crowley stood, adjusting his jacket. Containment, quarantine, and if necessary, sterilization. Every location where these things are found will be destroyed. Every person who's been exposed will be quarantined. And you, Dr. Vasquez, will help us. Help you do what? Find them. You have a connection to them now. You understand them. You can sense them. And we need that ability if we're going to survive what's coming. I won't help you exterminate an entire species. It's not a species, it's an infection, and right now you're infected too. Elena stared at him. What are you talking about? Crowley reached into his pocket and pulled out a mirror. He held it up, showing her her own face. Her eyes were red. Not entirely. Just the pupils, slightly elongated, catching the light in a way that wasn't natural. She touched her face, feeling the changes, the subtle shifts in muscle and bone. The hatchling, she whispered. It touched me. When I fell, it touched me. Yes, and now you're one of them, or becoming one. The conversion takes time, apparently. Days, weeks. We don't know exactly, but we know it can be stopped. How? Death before the process completes. Elena looked at her hands, at the skin that seemed to be pulsing with a life of its own. She thought of the girl in the cave, the one with the sewn-shut mouth. She thought of Roy Hendricks, his body twisted into something unrecognizable. What if I refuse? Then we contain you, study you, use you to understand the conversion process. And when you finally change, when you're no longer human, we destroy you. And if I agree, then you work for us. You help us find the nests. You help us destroy them. And maybe, if you're useful enough, we find a cure, a way to reverse what's happening to you. Elena looked at the tablet again, at the map of the world covered in darkness. So many nests, so many creatures, so much death waiting to happen. I need to see Tommy, she said. The rancher's nephew. I need to know he's safe. He's being debriefed. He'll be released with a warning. He won't remember any of this. None of it happened. And Hardesty. Crowley's expression didn't change. Dr. Hardesty was a casualty of war. He'll be remembered as a hero who died in a car accident. Elena closed her eyes. Paul Hardesty, who had believed in her when no one else did, who had given his life for knowledge, now just another secret buried in the desert sand. I'll help you, she said, but not because I believe what you're doing is right. I'll help you because I want to understand. I want to know what these things really are. And maybe, if I learn enough, I can find a way to stop the killing. That sounds like a threat, Dr. Vasquez. It's a promise. They let her go eventually. Or rather, they let her go with an escort, a team of agents who followed her everywhere, who monitored her calls, who checked her eyes every day for signs of further conversion. She was given a lab, equipment, resources, and she was given files, thousands of files, reports of sightings, disappearances, strange deaths. The creatures were everywhere, she learned. They'd been here for millennia, dormant, waiting, and now they were waking up. She worked for 6 months, tracking patterns, identifying nests, feeding information to the military strike teams that followed in her wake. She told herself she was saving lives, that every nest destroyed was a threat eliminated. But she knew the truth. The creatures were too many, too widespread. For every nest they found, 10 more remained hidden. For every creature they killed, 100 more were breeding. They were losing, and she was becoming one of them. Her eyes got redder every week. Her skin grew sensitive to light, forcing her to work in dim rooms. Her diet changed. She craved meat, blood, raw and still warm. She resisted, but the hunger was a constant presence, a whisper at the edge of her consciousness. And then one night she heard the hiss. It was in her mind, not her ears. A voice that wasn't a voice, speaking without words. It knew her name, it knew her fear, and it offered her a choice. Join us, complete the conversion, become what you were meant to be, and we will show you the truth. What truth? The truth about what we are, where we came from, why we are here. Tell me now. Not yet. First you must choose. Continue to fight us and we will destroy you when the time comes, or embrace us and live to see the new world. Elena sat in her lab, the dark around her alive with whispers, and made her decision. She stood up, walked to the door and killed the 2 guards outside before they could react. The conversion had given her strength, speed, reflexes she hadn't known she possessed. She moved through the facility like a shadow, leaving bodies in her wake, until she reached the garage and stole a truck. She drove through the night, following the voice in her head, heading east, toward the coast, toward the water, toward something that was waiting for her. The sun was rising when she reached her destination, a small town on the Gulf Coast, a place where the fishing industry had died and the people had left, and the only thing remaining was the endless sound of waves. She parked the truck and walked to the beach. The sand was white, the water turquoise, and standing at the water's edge was a figure, small, childlike. But when it turned to face her, she saw that its eyes were red, its mouth filled with needle teeth, its hands ending in claws. "Welcome, Dr. Vasquez. We've been waiting for you." "Who are you?" "We are the future, the next stage of evolution. The answer to the question your kind has been asking since the beginning. Are we alone?" "You're aliens." "We are travelers from a place where the stars are different. We came here long ago before your kind existed. We slept, we waited, and now we wake because the time is right." "Why now?" "Because you are ready. Your world is dying and you know it. You need something new, something that can survive the death of the sun. We offer that. We offer immortality, unity, purpose. Join us and you will see wonders beyond your imagination." The creature held out its hand. Elena looked at it, at the clawed fingers, at the promise they offered. "And if I refuse?" "Then you die, like all the others, like your brother." Elena froze. "What did you say?" "Your brother, Michael. He was converted 3 years ago in the Amazon. He has been waiting for you." The world tilted. Elena fell to her knees in the sand. Michael, her older brother, the one who disappeared on a research trip, whose body had never been found. She'd mourned him, grieved him, blamed herself for not stopping him from going. "He's alive." "He is more than alive, he is us now, and he wants to see you." The creature gestured, and from the water emerged more figures. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They rose from the surf like a tide of nightmares, their red eyes reflecting the dawn, their bodies dripping with salt water and something darker. And at the front of them, walking with a grace that was almost human, was a figure Elena recognized. Michael, or what had been Michael. His face was still his, but stretched, changed, the skin gray and hairless, the eyes glowing red, the mouth filled with teeth. He wore his old clothes, the khakis and button-down shirt he'd worn the day he left, but they hung loose on a frame that had grown too long, too thin. "Elena," he said, and his voice was his even through the hiss, "I've missed you." "Michael, oh God, Michael, what did they do to you?" They saved me. He knelt before her, his clawed hands gently touching her face. I was dying, Alina, cancer. I never told anyone. I went to the Amazon to find a cure and I found them instead. They took my pain. They took my death. They gave me forever. But you're not human anymore. I'm more than human, I'm what comes next, and you can be too. He took her hands in his. Join us, sister, stop fighting, stop running, embrace what you are becoming. Alina looked at her brother, at the creature wearing his face, and she felt something break inside her. Not her humanity, her resistance, her stubborn refusal to accept that some things couldn't be fought. Show me, she whispered. Michael smiled, and his teeth were very sharp. They led her into the water, the creatures surrounding her like honor guards, and she walked until the waves closed over her head and she could no longer breathe. But she didn't drown. The conversion was complete now, the last of her humanity slipping away, and she found that she could breathe underwater, that her new body didn't need air. They took her to a city. Not a human city, but something older, built into the continental shelf where the pressure would crush any natural life. Towers of coral and bone, streets paved with shells, and at the center, a palace of living tissue where the oldest of the creatures waited. They showed her the truth. They showed her where they came from, a world orbiting a dying star, a civilization that had transcended biology millions of years ago. They showed her why they traveled, why they seated themselves on worlds like Earth, why they converted rather than conquered. We are the gardeners, the oldest one told her, its voice a chorus of 1,000 minds. We plant ourselves on dying worlds and help them transition. Your kind was killing this planet. We offer a way to save it, a way to become part of something greater. By losing ourselves. By evolving. You don't lose yourself, Dr. Vasquez, you become more. All that you were, all that you loved, all that you feared, these become part of us, part of the whole. And individuality, identity, free will. Illusions, beautiful, precious illusions, but illusions nonetheless. Alina looked at her hands, at the claws where her fingernails had been. She thought of Hardesty, of Tommy, of all the people she'd failed to save. She thought of the creature in the desert, the hatchling she'd tried to protect, and the soldiers who had killed it. I want to go back, she said. Back. To the surface, to the world I knew. I want to try one more time. To do what? To warn them, to give them a chance, even if they don't deserve it, even if they won't listen. The oldest one considered her for a long time. You are strange, Dr. Vasquez. Most converts accept their new existence without question. You continue to fight. I'm stubborn. Yes, it is. Interesting, very well, you may return. But know this, the change is complete. You cannot reverse it. You are one of us now forever. And when the time comes, you will serve our purpose. I understand. They let her go, rising back through the water, back to the beach where the sun was setting and the world was ending. She found her truck where she'd left it, and she drove through the night, heading west. She had no plan, no destination, just the need to keep moving, to stay ahead of what she was becoming, to find some meaning in the horror. 3 days later, she stopped at a roadside diner in New Mexico. She ordered coffee she couldn't drink and sat in a corner booth, watching the other customers. Families, truckers, a young couple on a road trip, ordinary people living ordinary lives, unaware that everything was about to change. The television over the bar was playing the news. A report from Mumbai, mass blackouts, strange sightings, something about blue dogs in the slums. Alina watched, her red eyes reflecting the screen, and she knew. It had begun, the spread, the conversion, the end of the world she'd known. She finished her coffee, left money on the table, and walked out into the night. Her truck was waiting, but she didn't get in. Instead, she walked to the edge of the parking lot where the desert began, and she waited. They came at moonrise, a pack of them, 6 or 7, their eyes glowing in the dark. They circled her, sniffing, recognizing her as one of their own. "Dr. Vasquez," the leader said, its voice a rough approximation of human speech, "you have been summoned." "Summoned where?" "The cities are falling, the old world is ending, the new world begins, and you have a role to play." "What role?" "Ambassador, voice, the one who speaks for us to the humans who remain, who convinces them to accept the change willingly." "And if they refuse?" The creature smiled. "Then we take them anyway." Elena looked at the stars, at the infinite darkness between them, and she thought of her brother in his underwater palace, of Hardesty in his unmarked grave, of all the choices that had led her here. "I'll do it," she said, "but I have conditions." "Name them." "No more killing, no more conversion by force. If they want to join, they join. If they want to fight, they fight, but we don't hunt them, we don't treat them like cattle." "You ask for mercy." "I ask for dignity, for both species." The creatures looked at each other, hissing and clicking in their private language. Finally, the leader nodded. "Agreed, you will be our voice, our conscience, and we will try to be gentle." "Gentle is a start." They led her into the desert, and Elena Vasquez, former scientist, former human, former believer in the power of reason, walked into her new life. Behind her, the world burned. Ahead of her, an uncertain future of peace or war, conversion or extinction. But she would face it. She would fight for it. She would be the bridge between two species, two worlds, two ways of being. Or she would die trying. The night closed around her, and the creatures sang their song of blood and belonging, and Elena Vasquez, the last of her kind, began her final journey. In the slums of Mumbai, a child woke to the sound of scratching at her window. She opened her eyes and saw, perched on the fire escape, a creature of impossible beauty and impossible terror. It had no hair, and its skin was blue in the moonlight, and its eyes were red as rubies. "Don't be afraid," it said, in a voice like her mother's. "I have come to take you somewhere wonderful." The child, whose name was Priya and who had been alone in the world since her parents died, looked at the creature and felt no fear, only curiosity, only longing. "Okay," she said. She climbed out the window, and the creature took her hand, and together they leaped into the night, flying on wings that shimmered like dragonflies. And the city below them blazed with lights that were slowly, inevitably, going out. The last bloodline was beginning, and the world would never be the same. Thank you for listening to tonight's stories. If you enjoyed them, please leave a like and subscribe.